What if the creek in your hometown suddenly ran dry, revealing bones that were never meant to be found? Would you still believe in miracles? Or start questioning your faith? This story isn't just about Hollow Creek, it's about every secret small town hides beneath its Sunday prayers. If you've ever witnessed something that shouldn't be forgotten, leave a comment. Tell us where you're watching from, because tonight, the water remembers. The air in Hollow Creek carried that still, heavy silence that only happens right before something changes forever. For the first time in 50 years, the creek that had shaped the town's very name had gone dry. What remained was a cracked, clay-colored bed stretching beneath the old bridge like a scar across the land. Dr. Erin Walsh stood at the edge of it, the soles of her boots sinking slightly into the dust. The sound of cicadas filled the air, loud enough to hide her heartbeat. She had promised herself she would never come back here, not after the way this town buried the truth along with her father's badge. But the call from Sheriff Denton left her no choice. "You need to see this," he'd said. "It's about the creek." Erin adjusted her camera bag, scanning the waterless ravine. Her mind flickered to the stories she'd grown up hearing about the Red Creek Festival, about how 5 children vanished that summer of 1999, and how the town stopped talking about it overnight. They said the floods took them. But Erin had never believed that. Down in the hollow, 2 deputies were on their knees beside a shallow pit marked with yellow tape. Denton stood near them, his face drawn tight, a man trying to stay calm in front of the past. When Erin approached, he looked up. "Never thought I'd see you back here," he said quietly. "Neither did I," she replied. "What did you find?" He nodded toward the pit. "You tell me." Erin crouched down. Inside the cracked earth, half covered in clay, was something pale small, curved. Not stone, not wood. She brushed it gently with her glove, a child's femur, tiny, fragile, and unmistakably human. Her stomach turned cold. "You called forensics?" "They're on their way from Charleston," Denton said. "But Erin, there's more." He pointed to a piece of fabric caught under a rock nearby. Faded pink with small white daisies printed on it. Erin froze. That pattern. She had seen it before in one of her father's case photos. "Tessa Rayner," she whispered. "One of the missing kids." Denton nodded. "That's what I was afraid of." For a long moment, neither spoke. The wind rustled through the trees, carrying with it the faint echo of church bells from the hill, the old Baptist church, still standing after all these years. Erin glanced toward it, her pulse quickening. "They're still ringing that bell?" "Every day at noon," Denton said. "Pastor says it keeps the town's soul clean." "Or keeps people quiet," Erin muttered. He sighed. "Listen, I know why you came, but if you start digging into this, you're going to stir up more than bones." She looked back down at the femur, feeling the weight of memory press against her chest. "That's exactly what I came to do." Later that evening, Erin sat alone in her motel room, off Route 12. Her father's old files spread across the bed, yellowed photos, missing posters, handwritten notes. On one page, a name was circled 3 times in red ink: Samuel Keene. Beside it, her father had scrawled a single line. He saw something. Won't say what. The room was quiet except for the ticking of an old wall clock. Erin reached for the faucet to wash her hands and froze. The handle was turned off, yet somewhere inside the pipes, water began to whisper. A low, steady trickle, then a voice, soft, childlike, almost a breath. "Remember us." Erin stepped back, heart pounding, staring at the sink as the whisper faded. Outside, in the parking lot below, a car door slammed. Through the thin curtains, she saw a shadow move past her window, and a folded note slid under the door. She picked it up with trembling hands. In faded ink, written with careful, deliberate strokes, were the words, "You can't save what's already been baptized." And somewhere in the distance, the church bell rang once. The diner sat on the corner of Main and Willow, its neon sign half burned out, buzzing faintly against the pale morning sky. Erin pushed open the door and was greeted by the smell of old coffee and bacon grease. The booths were empty except for one man sitting near the back, his reflection trembling in the window glass. She recognized him instantly from the faded photo in her father's files, Samuel Keene, the only child who came back from the creek, now 34, his hair streaked with gray, a scar running down his left cheek like lightning frozen in skin. Erin slid into the booth across from him. Samuel Keene? He didn't look up. Haven't heard that name in a while. I'm Erin Walsh. My father— I know who your father was, he interrupted, his tone flat. He asked questions he shouldn't have. Cost him everything. The waitress poured coffee for both of them and left without a word, eyes down. Erin noticed how the few locals sitting near the counter stopped talking altogether. The silence was thicker than steam. I found something in the creek, Erin said softly. A bone, and a piece of Tessa Rayner's dress. Sam's hand tightened around his mug. You shouldn't have gone down there. I didn't have a choice, she said. Those kids deserve the truth. He finally met her eyes, pale blue, tired, full of something between guilt and warning. You think the truth will fix this town? You think it'll bring them peace? He gave a low, broken laugh. It won't. It'll just wake what's been sleeping. Erin leaned forward. Tell me what happened that night, Sam. Please. He stared out the window, watching a pair of church volunteers hang banners for the upcoming Red Creek Festival, bright red cloth fluttering in the wind. We were supposed to sing, he said quietly. It was after dark. Pastor Nathaniel told us we'd make the town clean again. Her pulse quickened. Clean from what? From sin, Sam whispered. That's what he said. We stood by the water, holding candles. He called it the baptism of atonement. Erin felt her throat tighten. And then, his jaw trembled. I ran. I heard them screaming. I never looked back. The diner lights flickered as thunder rumbled outside. Sam's scar glowed faintly under the fluorescent light. You think they drowned? Erin asked. He shook his head slowly. No. They were taken. The water took them because it was told to. A chill crept up her spine. By who? He turned toward her, voice almost a whisper. By the church. By the ones who ring that damn bell. Outside, the first drops of rain began to fall, dotting the window pane. Erin could hear the echo of the church bells on the hill, soft, deliberate, counting each second between them. Sam lowered his voice. You shouldn't be asking these questions. They'll know you're back. They already do, Erin said. Someone left a note under my door last night. His gaze snapped to hers. What did it say? She hesitated. It said, You can't save what's already been baptized. Sam's face went pale. Then you need to leave now. I'm not leaving. He reached into his jacket pocket and slid a small brass key across the table. If you're going to stay, you'll need this. What is it? She asked. The church's basement, he said. My father used to keep the maintenance tools there. Don't go alone. The rain outside grew heavier, turning the street into silver threads. Erin picked up the key, cold and damp from his hand. As she stood to leave, Sam's reflection disappeared from the window. He was already gone, the back door swinging shut behind him. Erin stepped into the rain, gripping the key tightly. Across town, the church bell began to ring again, 12 slow chimes echoing through the hollow valley. But this time, she realized, it wasn't noon. It was 6 in the morning. The rain hadn't stopped when Erin reached the church. The white steeple loomed above the trees, its paint peeling like old skin. Water streamed down the steps as she climbed toward the entrance, gripping the brass keys Samuel had given her. Every chime from the bell tower felt slower, heavier, as if the air itself resisted her approach. Inside, the sanctuary smelled of candle wax and mildew. Wooden pews lined the room, their varnish dull with age. A young woman arranging hymn books near the altar startled when she saw Erin. Ma'am, service isn't until Sunday. I'm here to see Reverend Rayner, Erin said, her voice steady. The woman hesitated, then nodded toward a door behind the pulpit. He's in the study. Erin approached the door and knocked lightly. A calm, even voice answered, Come in. Reverend Daniel Rayner Jr. sat behind a polished desk, his Bible open, hands folded. He looked younger than she expected, late 30s, clean-cut, his eyes pale and deliberate. On the wall behind him hung a portrait of his father, Reverend Nathaniel Rayner Sr., the man who had led the church when the children vanished. Dr. Walsh, he said, standing. I heard you were back. My condolences for your father. She nodded curtly. I'm investigating what happened in 1999. Bones were found in the creek. His expression didn't change. Yes, Sheriff Denton informed me. Your sister was one of the victims, Erin said carefully. Tessa Rayner. He exhaled softly. I was 8. I remember her laugh more than her face now. The town grieved together, and then moved on. Did your father ever talk about that night? No, he said, folding his hands again. He said some things were best left in God's hands. Erin studied him. Do you believe that? Rayner smiled faintly. Faith is a form of memory, Doctor. The only way to keep the past from rotting. Her eyes wandered to the bookshelf behind him. A row of old journals rested beside a framed photo of Tessa at the church picnic, the same day she disappeared. Erin's pulse quickened. May I see your father's records? I'm afraid those are private, he said smoothly. But you're welcome to join us for Sunday service. Sometimes, answers come in prayer. Erin forced a smile and rose. Thank you, Reverend. As she turned to leave, the young woman from earlier was standing near the door, her face pale. When Rayner walked her out, the woman whispered, Don't trust him. Erin froze. Why? The woman's eyes glistened. Because he's not his father's ghost. He's worse. Then she hurried down the hall before Erin could speak. Outside, thunder rolled across the valley. Erin stepped onto the wet grass, glancing back at the church. Through the study window, she saw Rayner watching her, his silhouette motionless, his hand resting on the same journal she'd seen on his desk. The wind picked up, carrying the faint toll of the church bell, again slow, deliberate. And this time, she could swear it spelled her name. The storm that night rolled through Hollow Creek like a living thing, rain drumming against the motel window, thunder crawling across the hills. Erin couldn't shake the woman's warning from her mind. He's worse. On the desk beside her, the brass key from Samuel gleamed faintly under the lamp. She'd spent hours staring at it, debating. Then, just before midnight, her phone buzzed. A single message from an unknown number. If you want the truth, come now. Back entrance. Erin grabbed her flashlight and coat and drove through the sheets of rain to the church. The road shimmered with puddles, and the trees leaned low as if listening. The parking lot was empty except for one small light glowing near the rectory door. Layla, the young woman from the church, was waiting under the awning, soaked through, her hair plastered to her face. You got my message, she whispered. Why are you helping me? Erin asked. Layla's eyes darted toward the main chapel. Because I've seen what he does when people ask too many questions. She unlocked the back door and led Erin down a narrow corridor that smelled of cedar and damp earth. They reached the study. Layla knelt, fumbling with a ring of keys, her hands shaking. He keeps his father's journal in here. The bottom drawer clicked open. Inside lay a small, leather-bound book, its edges worn smooth, pages yellowed and soft. Erin lifted it gently. The first page read, Nathaniel Rayner Sr., 1998, 1999. The handwriting was precise, almost elegant. She turned a page and began to read aloud. The children are chosen, 5 innocent souls for the cleansing of the valley. Their sacrifice will keep the waters calm. Her voice trembled. It's a ritual. Layla leaned closer. He believed it would protect the town. That's what Daniel told the congregation last year, that the covenant had to be renewed. Erin flipped to the last entry dated the 15th of August, 1999. The offering was made. The water carried them home. But the voice in the willow says it is not enough. Erin's breath caught. The voice in the willow, she whispered. That's the tree behind the baptism pool. Footsteps creaked in the hallway. Both women froze. Layla's eyes widened. He's back. The door handle turned. Erin stuffed the journal into her coat just as the door opened. Reverend Rayner stepped inside, rain glistening on his coat. He looked at them both, calm but sharp. Miss Burns, he said softly, it's late for cleaning. Layla stammered. I was just... His gaze shifted to Erin. Dr. Walsh, I didn't expect another visit so soon. Erin forced a smile. I couldn't sleep. Of course. He moved to his desk, setting down his umbrella. Some nights the storm keeps us all awake. He reached for the drawer. Erin's stomach twisted. The lock was relocked, but barely. His fingers brushed the handle, then stopped. For one long second, the room was still except for the ticking clock. Finally, he closed the drawer and turned toward them, his expression unreadable. "May the Lord grant you both rest," he said. Erin and Layla slipped out quickly. Rain lashed their faces as they ran toward the car. Layla grabbed Erin's sleeve. "Don't come back here alone, please." Then she vanished into the mist. Back at the motel, Erin spread the journal open under the flickering light. Page after page spoke of blood baptism, the covenant of water, the voice that remembers names. Her pulse pounded as she reached a final scrawled line added years later, in a different hand, Daniel's handwriting. One survived, the boy with the scar. The water still calls his name. Her breath caught. Samuel. A sound broke through the night, the crunch of tires on gravel outside her window. Erin peeked through the curtain. A car sat across the road, engine idling, headlights dimmed. Then the lights blinked twice, and the engine died. Her phone vibrated again. One new message. Tomorrow. The bridge. Midnight. Outside, thunder rolled like a voice awakening in the hills. The next morning dawned heavy and gray, fog curling low across Hollow Creek like breath over glass. Erin sat on the motel bed, the pastor's journal open beside her. The words from the final page echoed in her mind. One survived. The boy with the scar. She hadn't heard from Samuel since the night at the diner. The message, tomorrow, the bridge, midnight. Could have been from anyone, but something told her it was him, or someone who wanted her to think so. Sheriff Denton showed up just after 9, hat dripping with rain. He looked tired, older than she remembered. "You planning to tell me you broke into the church last night?" Erin didn't look up. "You already know," he sighed. "You always were like your father." He went digging too deep and never knew when to stop. She handed him the journal. He was right to dig. "Read this." Denton flipped through the pages, his eyes narrowing. These are confessions. "More like instructions," Erin said. "They believe the creek demanded sacrifices to keep the town safe, and I think Daniel's planning to do it again." He closed the book, jaw tight. "We don't deal in superstition. Tell that to the people who lost their kids 20 years ago." Rain drummed against the window. Erin stood, pacing. "Samuel's the key. The journal says one survived. He was there. He knows what they did." "You think he'll talk?" "He already has," she said. "He just doesn't realize it." By dusk, the rain had turned to mist again. Erin and Denton drove out toward the timberline, where Samuel's cabin sat half-hidden among the pines. The road narrowed to gravel, then to dirt, the cruiser's headlights slicing through the fog like knives. When they arrived, the chimney smoked faintly. Someone was home. Denton called out, "Samuel, it's Sheriff Denton. We just want to talk." No response. Erin stepped forward, knocking softly. The door creaked open under her hand. Inside, the cabin smelled of wood smoke and damp paper. The table was covered with sketches, children's faces, drawn in charcoal, all half-finished, their eyes blank. "Sam?" she called. A voice came from the corner. "I told you not to come." Samuel stood there, gaunt, shadows under his eyes. His hands trembled as he lowered the rifle he'd been holding. "They're watching the creek again," he said. "The water's rising early this year." Erin's heart thudded. "What did you mean in your message? The bridge, midnight." He stared at her for a long moment, then said quietly, "They're gathering again, same as before. I saw the candles." Denton frowned. "Who's they?" "Sam." "The congregation," he whispered. "Daniel's people. The covenant has to be renewed." Lightning flashed outside, illuminating the window. For an instant, Erin thought she saw movement figures in long coats, standing near the tree line. But when she blinked, they were gone. Samuel's breathing quickened. "You have to stop them before the creek takes more." Erin stepped closer. "Then help us. Tell me what happened that night." He closed his eyes. "We were children. They said we'd wash away the town's sins. I fell, hit a rock. That's how I got this." He traced the scar along his jaw. "When I woke up, they were gone. My sister's dress was on the water." The words hung between them, heavy as the rain. Then Denton's radio crackled, distorted by static. A deputy's voice broke through. "Sheriff Stormfront moving in fast. Bridge areas flooding already." Erin and Denton exchanged a look. Samuel grabbed her wrist suddenly, his voice hoarse. "If you go tonight, don't go near the Willow. That's where it listens." She swallowed hard. "What listens?" He met her eyes. "The water." Outside, thunder rolled over the valley, and the creek began to whisper again. The rain had turned relentless by nightfall, hammering the valley in thick sheets. The creek that had been bone-dry days ago now churned like a thing reborn, swallowing the banks inch by inch. Erin stood beside Sheriff Denton's cruiser on the ridge, watching the dark water twist through the hollow below. "Are you sure about this?" Denton asked, checking his flashlight. "No," Erin said, tightening her coat. "But if we wait, someone's going to die." Down by the old bridge, faint orange lights flickered through the rain lanterns. Figures moved in a slow procession toward the water's edge. Erin's pulse quickened. "They're here." Denton raised his binoculars. 6 of them. No, 7. That's the congregation. "And there," Erin whispered, "that's Daniel Rayner." He stood in the center of the group, coat dark with rain, a wooden cross clasped in his hands. His voice, deep and rhythmic, carried even through the storm. 16 years since the first offering. Tonight, we restore the balance. Erin felt the hair on her arms rise. He's repeating his father's ritual. Denton loaded his revolver. "Not if I can stop it." "Wait," she said, grabbing his arm. "If we rush in, they'll scatter. Let me record this first." She slipped down the slope, mud clinging to her boots, until she crouched behind a fallen log 20 yards from the group. She could hear them now chanting in low, wordless tones. Rayner lifted the cross higher. "The lost have returned to the soil," he intoned. "But one was spared, and through him, the sin endures." A figure stepped from the shadows. Erin's breath caught. Samuel. He looked dazed, soaked through, eyes unfocused as though sleepwalking. Rayner placed a hand on his shoulder. "The boy with the scar will bring the balance. Through his surrender, the water will rest." Erin rose, shouting, "Stop! Step away from him!" The chanting broke. Lantern lights swung wildly. Denton burst from the trees, gun drawn. "Hands where I can see them." But Rayner didn't move. He smiled faintly. "Sheriff Denton," he said, voice calm despite the chaos. "Faith doesn't bow to fear." He drew a small silver blade from his coat. Erin ran forward, rain stinging her face. "Don't do this," she screamed. Lightning split the sky. The blade flashed, and a gunshot thundered right after. The knife flew from Rayner's hand, spinning into the mud. Denton had fired. "Everyone down," he yelled. But something shifted in the air, a deep rumble rising not from the sky but from beneath the ground. The creek was moving, faster now, boiling. The lanterns flickered, their flames trembling as the water began to surge upward, swallowing the rocks, the roots, the edges of the bank. And then Erin heard it. Voices. Not from the people around her, but from the creek itself. Dozens of them, whispering in unison, names echoing through the storm. Tessa, Benji, Grace, Eli. Denton's face went pale. "What in God's name?" Samuel clutched his head, crying out. "They're calling me." He staggered toward the water. Erin grabbed him. "Sam, look at me. You're alive. You survived." He shook his head violently. "The water doesn't forget." Rayner lunged, dragging him toward the edge. "It must be done." "Let him go," Erin shouted. Denton fired again. The bullet struck Rayner's leg. He fell, releasing Samuel. The congregation scattered in panic, some screaming, some praying. The current exploded upward, a wave of black water surging around them. Erin and Denton scrambled for higher ground as the bridge cracked and split in two. Rayner lay on the bank, blood mixing with the mud. Erin knelt beside him, drenched and shaking. "Why?" she demanded. He smiled through the pain. "To save them," he whispered. "To save all of us." The water remembers sin, Doctor, and it always comes to collect. His eyes went glassy. Thunder crashed one final time and the creek went still. Erin looked down into the black surface. For a brief heartbeat she saw them. 5 pale shapes beneath the water, hands reaching up as if in farewell. Then the reflection shattered, leaving only rain. Denton stood beside her, trembling. "It's over." Erin shook her head. "No, it's only beginning." From somewhere far downstream, a church bell tolled, once low and hollow, cutting through the storm like a warning. Dawn broke over Hollow Creek like a bruise, the sky streaked in purple and gray. The storm had passed, but the silence it left behind felt heavier than thunder. The bridge was gone, ripped clean from its foundations. The creek ran black and swollen, carrying fragments of lanterns, hymn books, and something darker that no one dared name. Erin stood by the sheriff's cruiser, her hair still damp, boots caked with mud. Sheriff Denton approached slowly, eyes sunken with exhaustion. "Coroner's on the way," he said. They found Rayner's body a mile downriver, neck snapped on the rocks. Erin didn't respond. Her gaze stayed fixed on the water, where the reflection of the shattered steeple wavered. "And Samuel?" Denton shook his head. "Gone. Either the current took him, or he's hiding. Nobody knows." She closed her eyes. The sound of the voices from last night still whispered faintly at the edge of her thoughts. Those names, repeated like a prayer. Tessa, Grace, Benji. Behind them, the townsfolk had begun to gather. Some whispered prayers, others stared blankly at the ruins. The mayor called it a tragedy during a religious ceremony. No one mentioned the chanting, the ritual, the knife. No one dared. Denton exhaled. "You realize what's going to happen now, right? They'll bury it, just like before." "Not this time," Erin said. "Not again." Back at the sheriff's office, she spread her notes across the table, the pastor's journal, her father's old files, photos of the creek from 1999, and now the pattern was undeniable. Every 20 years, a flood. Always children, always the church. "Look at this," she said, sliding an old newspaper clipping toward Denton. "Hollow Ford mining disaster. 1,859. 47 dead, mostly miners' children. The Rayners were foremen then. The first flood started everything." Denton frowned. "You're saying this town was built on the same riverbed?" "Yes," she replied. "And they turned a disaster into doctrine. The covenant was just a way to make peace with their guilt." He rubbed his temples. "Jesus." "No," Erin said quietly. "Not Jesus. Just men pretending to be him." The power flickered. The fluorescent lights buzzed, then dimmed. Outside, a low wind rose from the valley, carrying with it the faint scent of river mud. Erin glanced toward the window and froze. Someone was standing in the rain. A tall figure in a dark coat, still as stone. For a split second she thought she saw Samuel's face, then the shape turned and vanished behind the fog. She ran to the door, stepping out into the drizzle. "Samuel," she called. No answer, only the whisper of the creek below. When she returned, Denton was holding something in his hand, a brass locket mud-caked, but still intact. He'd found it outside the station door. Inside was a photo of a young girl with bright eyes and a chipped front tooth. "Tessa Rayner," Erin murmured. "There's something else," Denton said, turning the locket over. Scratched into the back were 3 words. "The water sleeps." Erin stared at it, her pulse quickening. "That's not a warning," she whispered. "That's a lie." Denton frowned. "What do you mean?" "If the water sleeps," she said, "then why do I still hear it?" He gave her a weary look. "You need rest." But Erin's eyes were fixed on the window, where the fog pressed against the glass like breath. Somewhere out there, beneath the church ruins, the creek was still moving. She could feel it in her bones, alive, patient, waiting. The radio crackled suddenly with static. Then a faint voice broke through, childlike, trembling. "Dr. Walsh," it whispered. "Under the willow." Erin's blood ran cold. She grabbed her coat. Denton reached for her arm. "You're not going back there." "Yes, I am," she said, "because if Samuel's alive, he's under that tree." She stepped out into the rain. The sound of the creek followed her down the road, rising and falling like breathing, and far in the distance, beneath the veil of fog, the church bell tolled once more, though the church itself no longer stood. 3 days later, the storm clouds lifted, leaving Hollow Creek coated in silence and ash-gray light. The smell of wet earth clung to everything. Houses stood half submerged in mud. Children chalked crosses on their doors while adults avoided each other's eyes. The town was pretending to heal, but the ground still trembled with what had been unearthed. Erin sat at a table inside the diner, now turned into a temporary relief center. She watched volunteers hand out coffee and blankets, their laughter forced. Sheriff Denton entered quietly, his uniform wrinkled, his face drawn. He slid a folded piece of paper across the table. "They found Samuel," he said. She hesitated before opening it. "Found near the Willow." The handwriting was shaky, the words blurred from rain. "No body. Just a torn jacket tangled in the roots." "Maybe he made it out," she said softly. "Or maybe he went where he always belonged," Denton replied. "The river's still too deep to search." Erin looked through the diner window. The creek had calmed, smooth as glass. "They'll build again," she murmured. "Pretend this never happened." He nodded. "That's what people do." That night, back in her motel room, Erin opened her laptop and began to write. The Vanishing of Hollow Creek. A chronicle of faith and blood. The words came slow, trembling, as if the air itself resisted. She typed about the children, the covenant, the way the town's silence was a deeper wound than any flood. When she paused, a knock came at her door light, almost hesitant. She opened it to find a small bundle wrapped in plastic. Inside was a child's drawing, a woman standing beside a willow tree holding a lantern. Beneath it, a name scrawled in red crayon. Eli. Her heart stopped. The Rayner boy had vanished the night of the flood. She turned the paper over. On the back was a single line written in pencil. "He's still calling." Erin stepped outside, the chill biting through her sleeves. The night was quiet, too quiet. Down the hill, the creek shimmered under the moonlight, calm, innocent, deceptive. For a moment, she thought she saw a lantern's glow swaying near the willow. Then it faded, leaving only the whisper of water and the echo of the bell that no longer existed. Erin whispered into the darkness, "I remember." The wind stirred, carrying her words downstream. 1 year later, Hollow Creek looked brand new, fresh paint, new church, smiling mayor. But to Erin, it felt like a lie wearing Sunday clothes. She returned to town only because her book tour had brought her close. Her story, The Vanishing of Hollow Creek, had become a bestseller, and people called it a haunting work of truth. The locals called it fiction. She parked near the rebuilt bridge, the same spot where everything had begun. Tourists stopped to take photos with the commemorative plaque. "In memory of those lost to the flood of 2020. Not a word about the covenant. Not a word about the children." A little girl in a red ribbon skipped past her, laughing, chasing a paper boat down the stream. For an instant, Erin's heart clenched the way the girl's hair caught the light, the echo of Tessa Rayner's photograph. Across the creek, the new church gleamed white in the morning sun, all steel and glass. Its bell tower shimmered like a blade. Erin walked closer, drawn by the hollow sound of a chime carried on the wind. The inscription on the cornerstone read, "Blessed are those who rebuild." Inside, everything smelled of cedar and new beginnings. She ran her hand along the pews, her reflection flickering in the polished floor. When she reached the altar, something caught her eye, carved faintly beneath the varnish, so thin it might have been overlooked. "Blood remembers water." Her pulse quickened. She backed away, the air suddenly colder. Outside, the creek murmured faintly, though there was no wind. As she reached the bridge, something glinted near the railing. She crouched an old brass locket, half buried in silt. The same one from the sheriff's desk, the one that had vanished months ago. She turned it over. The back now read, scratched anew, "We're awake." Erin froze. Downstream, the paper boat the little girl had been chasing caught in a swirl of current, then spun in circles, faster, faster, before being pulled straight down. The girl gasped. Erin ran toward her, but before she could reach the edge, the water stilled again, smooth and innocent. The little girl looked up at her. "Did you hear them?" she whispered. Erin knelt, her voice barely a breath. "Hear who, sweetheart?" "The ones under the water," the girl said simply. "They said they know your name." A chill rippled through the air. The church bell rang once deep, low, impossible. Erin turned toward the creek, heart pounding, whispering the same words that had ended her book. If the story ever feels finished, check the water. The Hollow Creek Covenant is more than a story about a haunted town. It's a reflection of the quiet dangers that live inside denial, faith without reason, and the human tendency to bury pain rather than face it. Through Erin Walsh's journey, we're reminded that truth, no matter how dark, is the only thing that sets a community free. The story speaks to how trauma can echo through generations when silence becomes tradition and guilt is dressed up as faith. It shows us that real redemption isn't found in rituals or monuments, but in courage, the courage to look directly at what's been hidden beneath the surface. Hollow Creek mirrors every small town that's ever chosen comfort over conscience, and every person who's ever been told to forget. Its lesson is simple but profound. What we refuse to confront, we eventually become. The voices beneath the water aren't ghosts, they're memories demanding justice, compassion, and remembrance. And in that, the story carries a deeply American truth, that faith and accountability must coexist. And healing only begins when we stop fearing the sound of the truth rising from the depths.